Everyone said I was crazy for taking this job. Maybe they were right, but when you're a medical school dropout drowning in debt with no other prospects, a night shift position at a private mortuary with an unusually high salary becomes incredibly attractive, especially when you have no other options. My name is Derek. I'm 22 years old, and I had just become a part-time employee at Flint and Sons, a private funeral establishment dating back to the 19th century, located on the outskirts of Edinburgh, Scotland. The old sandstone building stood alone at the end of a secluded lane, surrounded by ancient pine trees and a low stone wall thick with moss. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Dr. Monroe, my former professor, asked when he was writing my letter of recommendation. "That place has a bad reputation." "I need the money," I replied, "and I'm not afraid of death." He looked at me with a strange expression. "You should be." I thought he was joking. On my first day, I met Mr. Flint, the owner of the mortuary, a gaunt, severe-looking man with a neatly trimmed white beard. His age could have been anywhere between 60 and 80. Mr. Flint was not the talkative type. He led me on a quick tour of the facility: the cold room where bodies were stored, the embalming room, the preparation room, the office area, and the waiting room for visiting families. "Your job is simple," Mr. Flint said. "Night shift from 10 in the evening until 6 in the morning. Monitor the cold room temperature, keep the logbooks, and prepare any new arrivals before Hannah comes in for the morning shift." "Do many people die at night?" I asked. "Most people die at night," Mr. Flint replied, not looking at me. "Especially between 3 and 4 in the morning, the devil's hour." A cold shiver ran down my spine, but I did my best to stay composed. "One more thing," Mr. Flint said, handing me a framed piece of paper. "These rules are non-negotiable, no exceptions." I skimmed the list. 1. Never turn off the lights in the cold room for any reason. 2. Do not speak to the spirits of the dead. 3. Do not open refrigerator number 7 on Thursdays. 4. Always wear gloves when touching a body. 5. Never work alone after 3 a.m. 6. Always lock the front door twice when leaving. 7. If you hear knocking after 10 p.m., do not open the door. 8. If the telephone rings at exactly midnight, answer before the third ring. 9. If your name is called 3 times in a row, do not turn around. 10. If you encounter a stranger in the hallway, ask who they are looking for. 11. Do not touch the personal belongings of the deceased without wearing gloves. 12. Always carry salt in your pocket. I looked at Mr. Flint with unconcealed surprise. "Is this some kind of prank you pull on new employees?" "There is nothing to joke about here," Mr. Flint said, his face utterly expressionless. "These rules were written in blood and tears. Break them, and you will pay the price." I figured he was just trying to scare me. The usual hazing ritual for new hires. But as Mr. Flint walked me through the equipment and procedures, I began to wonder why a small mortuary on the outskirts of the city was paying such a high wage to a dropout like me. "Sebastian will be at the gate," Mr. Flint said. "If there's a problem, call him. But I advise you not to bother him unless it's truly necessary." Mr. Flint was about to leave as my first shift began. At the door, he stopped and turned back to look at me. "One more thing, Sullivan. No matter what you hear or see in the night, remember that the dead do not always rest in peace." With that, Mr. Flint left, leaving me alone with the refrigeration units and an unsettling feeling that something was very wrong about this place. But it was too late to back out. I needed the money, and this was my only chance. What I didn't know then was that this first night shift would be only the beginning of the most terrifying chain of events in my life. The whole first night started out fairly quiet. I sat in the small office, looking through the files on the current clients. 4 bodies. An old man who had died of a stroke, a middle-aged woman who had died of cancer, a young man who had committed suicide, and 1 body with no information, marked only as pending processing. That last one struck me as strange. Around 11 o'clock, I decided to check the cold room temperature as Mr. Flint had instructed. The room was frigid, with rows of stainless steel storage units reflecting the pale white fluorescent light. I quickly checked the temperature of each unit and noted the figures on the form. When I reached unit number 7, I paused. There was nothing unusual about it, but Rule 3 had suddenly surfaced in my mind. Do not open refrigerator number 7 on Thursdays. Today was Tuesday, but I still felt a peculiar unease. I quickly read the temperature and moved on to the next unit. When I returned to the office, I found a missed call on the landline. No number displayed, no message. I shrugged and decided to watch a film on my laptop to kill the time. The clock struck midnight, and as if summoned by some invisible signal, the office telephone began to ring. I startled, remembering Rule 8. If the telephone rings at exactly midnight, answer before the third ring. 1, 2. I snatched up the receiver. Flint and Sons, Mortuary. Derek speaking, I said, trying to sound professional. Silence. Then a faint breath. Hello? I asked. It has arrived. A voice, barely audible, somewhere between male and female, spoke. I'm sorry, what has arrived? Who is this? I asked, my heart beating faster. It's in the room with you. The line went dead. I slowly set the receiver down, telling myself it was just a prank. Maybe Sebastian, the security guard, or perhaps Hannah, the daytime colleague I hadn't yet met. I went back to the film but couldn't concentrate. My eyes kept sliding toward the door to the corridor. I began noticing every small sound, the creak of pipes, the clicking of the refrigeration system, the wind outside the window. Around 2 in the morning, I decided to use the toilet. The bathroom was at the far end of the hallway, directly across from the preparation room. As I passed the cold room, I heard a faint sound from inside, like a soft scratching. I stopped and listened. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Just the refrigeration system, I told myself, or metal expanding with temperature changes. Still, I opened the cold room door to check. The room was exactly as I had left it. Still, cold, the storage units lined up in tidy rows. I listened. Nothing. I shrugged and turned to leave. Then I heard it. Something else, very soft, like a whisper. Derek. I froze. Someone had just called my name. The voice seemed to come from Unit 4, the one holding the body of the young man who had committed suicide. Derek, help me. I stepped back, my heart hammering in my chest. Rule 2 flashed in my mind. Do not speak to the spirits of the dead. Just my imagination, I muttered to myself. There's nothing there. Derek, I know you can hear me. Open the door. The voice was clearer now. A young male voice, pleading. I backed toward the exit. Derek, Derek, Derek. I suddenly remembered Rule 9. If your name is called 3 times in a row, do not turn around. Too late. I had already heard it. I spun around and ran out of the room, slamming the door shut behind me. I stood in the corridor drenched in sweat, despite the cold. From the corner of my eye, I caught movement. A dark shape stepping out of the preparation room. I whipped around and saw a large man emerging from the shadows. I let out a startled shout. Good Lord! I gasped. Are you all right? The man asked. He was tall and broad-shouldered, around 50, wearing a security uniform. Sebastian? I asked, remembering the night guard's name. He nodded. I heard a noise and came to check. What happened? I thought I heard a voice from inside one of the storage units. I admitted, feeling foolish saying it aloud. Sebastian did not laugh. He simply looked at me with grave seriousness. Did you answer it? No, I said. Rule 2. Sebastian nodded, looking satisfied. Good. Come with me. We'll do a walkthrough of the building. It's 3 o'clock now. He paused. Rule 5, remember? Never work alone after 3 in the morning. We inspected the entire mortuary. Sebastian said very little, only occasionally directing me on what to do. When we returned to the office, I noticed he always carried a small white pouch. What's that? I asked. Salt, Sebastian replied, his eyes watchful. Rule 12. Always carry salt in your pocket. Why salt? He only looked at me. You'll know when you need it. The rest of the night passed in silence, but I couldn't stop thinking about the whisper from the storage unit. Was it really a voice from a corpse? When Hannah arrived to take over the morning shift at 6, I was nearly overjoyed to be leaving. She was a red-haired woman in her mid-20s, with a warm smile that seemed entirely out of place in the gloomy mortuary. "How was your first night?" she asked. "Fine," I lied. "Just a bit sleepy." "You'll get used to it," she said, then lowered her voice. "And you know, if you hear anything, don't answer. All right?" As I left, I wondered what I had gotten myself into. But I needed the money, and after all, it was just my imagination, wasn't it? Still, on the way home, I stopped at a grocery store and bought a large packet of salt. After my first night shift, I slept through a barrage of nightmares about whispers and refrigeration units. When I woke in the afternoon, I decided to research Flint and Sons a little more. A few clicks on Google told me the place had been in operation since 1872, founded by one Ezekiel Flint, presumably an ancestor of the current owner. More interesting were the posts on local forums. Many Edinburgh residents considered it a haunted location, and there were circulating stories about strange sounds in the night, about people who entered the mortuary but never came back out, and about suspicious deaths among staff members over the years. All nonsense, I told myself, though my heart didn't entirely agree. I kept thinking about the whisper from the night before. Had that really been a voice from a dead man? I arrived early for my second shift, hoping to speak with Hannah before she left. Fortunately, she was still finishing her paperwork when I walked in. "Hello, Derek," she smiled. "Sleep well?" "Not exactly," I admitted. "Hannah, can I ask you a few things?" She glanced around as if checking for eavesdroppers, then nodded. "Let's go to the preparation room." Mr. Flint is in his office. We went to the preparation room. A simple space with a stainless steel table in the center, tools and chemicals arranged neatly on shelves, no current clients being processed. So, Hannah leaned against the table. "What do you want to know?" "These rules," I began. "Are they really important, or just the superstitions of an eccentric old man?" Hannah studied me carefully. "Have you broken any yet?" "No," I answered quickly. "But I heard a voice from one of the storage units." Hannah sighed. "It always starts that way." "What does?" "Listen, Derek," she said, her tone turning serious. "Those rules aren't a joke. They were written for very real reasons. This place is not normal. Do you believe in ghosts?" I laughed softly. "I believe in what I see and hear," Hannah replied. "And I've been here long enough to know that Flint and Sons is not like other places." Hannah told me about the history of the mortuary. Ezekiel Flint, the founder, was no ordinary embalmer. He had studied the occult and esoteric arts and was said to have performed experiments on corpses. According to local legend, he sought to open a doorway between the world of the living and the world of the dead. "But that's just folklore," Hannah said, though she didn't sound entirely convinced. "And the current Mr. Flint?" "Harold Flint, 5th generation. He knows far more than he lets on." She lowered her voice. "Do you know why this position is always vacant? The person before you, Liam, only lasted 2 weeks. He didn't follow Rule 7. He opened the door when he heard knocking after 10 at night." She paused. "They found him inside refrigerator Unit 7. Frozen solid. No one knew how he got in there, or why." A chill ran down my spine. "You're trying to scare me." "I'm trying to warn you," Hannah said firmly. "And I'll tell you one more thing. Occasionally, a special client arrives, usually on a Thursday night. They're placed in Unit 7. I don't know who they are. Mr. Flint handles those cases personally, but after they arrive, things always become strange. The whispers grow louder. There are more incidents." She checked her watch. "I have to go. But listen, Derek. If you want to survive this job, follow the rules. No exceptions." After Hannah left, I remained with a heavy feeling in my chest. The rational part of me wanted to dismiss it all as ghost story nonsense. But I couldn't deny what I had heard the night before. I began my second shift with more anxiety than the first. While checking temperatures in the cold room, I did my best not to look at Unit 4, where I had heard the voice. Unit 7 remained empty, and I found myself wondering about the special client Hannah had mentioned. Around 11 that night, the telephone rang. I answered with caution. "Flint and Sons." Derek speaking. Transfer is coming, a cold male voice said. 15 minutes. At this hour? I asked, bewildered. Special case. Mr. Flint has been notified. Prepare Unit 7. Before I could ask anything further, the line went dead. My heart was pounding. Unit 7. Special client. On a Thursday night. I called Sebastian immediately and explained the situation. I'm coming up, he said, his voice tense. Don't touch the body. Do you understand? Leave it to me. 15 minutes later, a black hearse pulled up to the front. Sebastian stood beside me as two men in black carried in a body bag. They said nothing, handed over a thin file, and left immediately. Sebastian opened the file. Mary Winters, 27 years old. Cause of death undetermined. Undetermined? I asked. Don't ask, Sebastian said. The less you know, the better. Help me get her into Unit 7. We laid the body bag on the steel table in the cold room. Sebastian unlocked the zipper slightly to check, and for a moment I caught a glimpse of the woman inside. Skin as white as chalk, long black hair, and lips that appeared faintly blue. She looks strange, I murmured. Don't look. Sebastian cut me off, closing the bag. And don't ever speak of her. When we slid Mary Winters into Unit 7 and shut the door, I could have sworn the temperature in the cold room dropped by several degrees. Sebastian pulled me quickly out of the room. Remember, he said, Rule 3. Do not open refrigerator number 7 on Thursday. Tomorrow is Thursday. Whatever you hear, whatever you see, do not open that unit. Why? I asked. Who is she? Sebastian only shook his head. You don't want to know. Now let's check all the exits together. Tonight will not be a normal night. As we walked the corridor, I glanced back toward the cold room. And I could have sworn I heard something. Very faint. A woman's voice singing softly. A lullaby. Mary Winters had arrived. And I had a feeling that things were about to get much, much worse. After Mary Winters was placed in Unit 7, everything changed. The temperature throughout the entire mortuary seemed to drop, despite the heating running at full capacity. The lights flickered without pattern, and strange sounds from the water pipes and ventilation system rang out continuously. Sebastian stayed with me until 4 in the morning, silent and tense. He checked the cold room door every half hour, but never stepped inside, only peering through the small glass panel. Do you think something is going to happen? I asked as we sat in the office drinking cold coffee. I don't think, Sebastian said, his voice low. I know. Cases like Mary Winters, they don't truly rest. What do you mean? He only shook his head. You're on shift tomorrow night. Thursday, aren't you? Of course, I said. I signed a contract. Bring more salt, Sebastian said. And perhaps say a prayer. He left at 4 in the morning, leaving me alone with my thoughts and my fear. The rest of the shift passed in suspicious quiet. When Hannah arrived the next morning, her face was drawn tight. I heard about Mary Winters, she said the moment she walked in. Are you all right? What do you know about her? She glanced around nervously. Mary Winters isn't her real name. It's a code name for a special type of case. We receive a Mary Winters every few months. Always a young woman, always with blue lips, always placed in Unit 7. She paused. No one knows how they die, or if anyone knows, they don't say. But there are rumors that they are victims of some kind of ritual. The trouble is, every time a winter arrives, strange things happen in the 24 hours that follow. Especially on Thursdays. She checked the time. Like today. I went home with a heaviness I couldn't shake. I couldn't sleep despite my exhaustion. I searched the internet for information about Mary Winters, but found nothing useful. Instead, I stumbled upon an article about ancient occult rituals and the belief that certain types of death could create a bridge between the living and the dead. When I returned to the mortuary that Thursday evening, Mr. Flint was waiting, which was unusual. He rarely appeared at this hour. Sullivan, He nodded. I trust you've been informed about the client in Unit 7. Yes, sir, I replied. You remember Rule 3, do not open refrigerator number 7 on Thursday. Correct, Flint said gravely. Whatever happens tonight, whatever you hear, whatever anyone tells you to do not open that unit. Do you understand? I nodded, feeling the full weight of his seriousness. Sebastian has a family matter tonight, Mr. Flint continued. You'll be alone, but remember Rule 5. Never work alone after 3 in the morning. I'll return at 3. He paused at the door. Don't do anything foolish. After he left, I sat in the office, strained and watchful. The first 2 hours passed quietly. Then at around 11:45, the telephone rang. Flint and Sons, Derek speaking. She's waking up. A deep, elderly voice said, Not Flint's, not Sebastian's. You need to check Unit 7. Who is this? I asked, my heart accelerating. She needs help. You have to open the unit. She can't breathe. I hung up, hands trembling. Rule 3 rang in my head. Do not open refrigerator number 7 on Thursday. Just minutes later, I heard sounds from the cold room. A soft scratching, then banging. Heart hammering, I stood and slowly approached the cold room door. Through the small glass panel, I could see nothing unusual, but the sounds continued. Scratching, banging. The noise was clearly coming from Unit 7. Just the refrigeration mechanism, I told myself, or thermal expansion of the metal. But then I heard it, a gasping breath, a soft cry, a woman's voice. Please, someone, I'm alive, please. I stood frozen with fear and confusion. Could that be Mary Winters? Was she truly alive? Or was this some sort of trap? I thought about Rule 3, about Flint's warnings, about Hannah's and Sebastian's warnings. But if there was a living person locked inside a freezer, the crying grew more desperate. Please, I can't breathe, it's so cold. I couldn't stand still any longer. I opened the cold room door and stepped inside. The room was glacial, my breath misting in the air. I moved slowly toward Unit 7, from which the crying and pounding came. I'm sorry, I said aloud. I'm not allowed to open this unit. The crying stopped. After a long silence, a very different voice came from inside. Deep and terrifying, not remotely human. Then we will come out another way. A sudden blast of cold air poured through the gap around Unit 7's door, and the lights in the cold room flickered violently. I backed away, my heart ready to burst. I had to get out. I had to call Flint. When I turned to run, I saw her. A woman in a white dress standing in the doorway, blocking my exit. Long black hair hung down over her face. 2 pale hands rested on the doorframe. I screamed and lurched backward, crashing into Unit 5, toppling it with a crash. I lunged left, searching for another way out, but the woman moved with impossible speed, cutting off every direction. Who are you? I stammered. She slowly raised her head, and I saw the face. White as bone, lips tinged blue. Mary Winters. But her eyes were empty, 2 black voids. You broke the rules, she said, in a voice that was not human. Now you belong to us. In that moment, I remembered Rule 12. I shoved my hand into my pocket and found the packet of salt Sebastian had reminded me to carry. In a desperate motion, I threw a fistful of salt directly at her. She let out a shriek, a horrible, inhuman scream, her body twisting in ways that defied anatomy. I seized the moment and lunged through the gap, racing out of the cold room and slamming the door shut behind me. I ran to the office, hands shaking as I dialed Mr. Flint's number. He answered immediately, as though he had been waiting for my call. What have you done? Mr. Flint asked, his voice cold. I didn't open the unit, I said, breathless. But she's out. Mary Winters. She's in the cold room. Stay where you are, Flint commanded. Scatter salt in a ring around your desk. Do not leave the circle for any reason. I'm on my way. I did as he said, hands still trembling as I poured a ring of salt around the desk. Then I sat down, heart hammering, sweating in spite of the cold. Time seemed to stretch. I didn't dare look toward the door, but I could feel a presence in the hallway. Something moving. waiting, watching. Then I heard it. Soft, deliberate knocking. Not from the front door, from the office door. Just a few meters away from me. Knock, knock, knock. Derek. Mary Winters' voice, now sweet and hypnotic. Open the door, Derek. I won't hurt you. I just want to talk. I didn't answer. I barely dared to breathe. Derek, you can't hide forever. You broke the rules. Now you have to pay. I heard her fingernails dragging along the door. Gently at first, then harder and harder, until the sound was like something tearing through my eardrums. Derek, open this door. The clock struck 3 in the morning. And like a miracle, I heard the front door open. Heavy footsteps rushing down the corridor. Flint! I shouted. I'm in the office! I heard Mr. Flint's low voice pronouncing words I didn't understand, some kind of ancient language. Then, a piercing shriek from Mary Winters and a loud crash as if something had been hurled against the wall, followed by silence. A few minutes later, the office door opened. Mr. Flint stood in the doorway, drenched in sweat, one side of his suit jacket torn. In his hands, he held a large bag of salt and a bottle of murky liquid. Where is she? I asked, my voice shaking. Back where she belongs, Flint said briefly. Though not thanks to you. I didn't open the unit, I protested. No, you didn't open the unit, Flint admitted with a sigh. But you broke Rule 2. You spoke to the spirit of the dead. I tried to recall. I had said, I'm not allowed to open this unit. When the crying came from the storage unit, I had violated Rule 2. I didn't mean to, I said. That is why we have the rules, Flint said, sounding utterly exhausted. Not to make things difficult for you, but to protect you. To protect all of us. Mr. Flint sat down beside me and wiped the sweat from his forehead. Tonight, we were lucky, Sullivan. But don't expect luck to come a second time. I nodded, still trembling. Mary Winters, I said. What is she? What is she really? Flint looked at me for a long moment. Do you truly want to know? I wasn't sure, but I nodded. There are things older than this mortuary, Sullivan, he said quietly. Things that are hungry and patient. And sometimes they find a way back. That night, we sat in the office together until dawn, enclosed within the ring of salt, saying very little. When Hannah arrived in the morning, she looked at me with understanding eyes. You saw her, she said, not a question, I nodded. And you're still alive. Hannah shook her head in quiet amazement. You're lucky, Derek Sullivan. Lucky? I didn't feel lucky. I felt like a man who had glimpsed something the living were never meant to see. And I knew with deep certainty that Mary Winters would not give up so easily. After the incident with Mary Winters, I seriously considered quitting, but curiosity and the plain truth that I still desperately needed the money kept me in place. More than that, part of me felt I had been drawn into something larger than myself, and I needed to understand it. Mr. Flint gave me 2 days off. When I returned on Sunday evening, I found that Unit 7 was empty. Mary Winters had been transferred, but the questions continued to haunt me. Who or what was she? Hannah and Sebastian became more open with me after that incident, perhaps because I had been initiated into their world in my own way. During our shift handover, I asked Hannah more about Mary Winters. I don't know much, Hannah admitted as we sat in the small break room. But there's someone who does. Eliza Lambert. She worked here from the 80s, retired 2 years ago. She lives in the city center. Hannah wrote the address on a scrap of paper. She knows a great deal about the history of this place and about the Winters. I decided to visit Eliza that afternoon before my shift. She lived in a small flat decorated with antiques and a great many books on occultism and the esoteric. When I explained who I was and what I was looking for, she looked at me with bright, sharp eyes, despite being well past 70. So you've met a Mary, she said, pouring tea for us both. And you're still alive. Interesting. What do you know about them? I asked. Why do they all go by the name Mary Winters? Eliza took a sip of her tea. That isn't their real name. It's Flint and Sons. code name for a particular type of case. She paused. Do you know when the mortuary was founded? 1872, I said. By Ezekiel Flint. A learned and curious man, Eliza continued. Too curious. Do you know the history of the land on which the mortuary was built? Before it was a mortuary, it was an old chapel, built on the site of an ancient pagan shrine, pre-Christian. People say that land is a thin place, a location where the boundary between our world and another becomes fragile. She set her teacup down. Ezekiel Flint wasn't merely an embalmer. He studied the dead and believed he could communicate with them. Not just communicate, he wanted to open a gateway, a passage. Did he succeed? I asked. After a fashion, Eliza said sadly. He performed a ritual, using himself as the sacrifice. They found him in the basement, stripped bare but still alive, his mouth repeating words no one could understand. Ezekiel died 3 days later, but before he died, he wrote out the first set of rules, the ones you now follow. She refilled my cup. As for Mary Winters, the real one, the very first, her name was indeed Mary Winters, a young woman who died under mysterious circumstances in 1897. But when her body was brought to Flint's mortuary, strange things began happening immediately. People said that Mary hadn't truly died, or hadn't died completely, that something had used her body as a vessel. Eliza looked directly into my eyes. Ever since then, every few months or every few years, another Winter appears. Always a young woman. Always with blue lips. Always discovered under baffling circumstances. And always carrying a different presence within her. So Mary Winters isn't a person, I said. They were, once, Eliza replied. But by the time they reach Flint's, they are something else. These entities use the bodies of the dead as vehicles, trying to find their way back into our world. Ezekiel opened something he could not close. What are they? I asked quietly. Ancient entities from before humanity held dominion over the earth. They were cast out long ago but have never stopped seeking a way back. She finished her tea. The rules aren't mere superstition. They are protections, developed through decades of dealing with what Mary Winters carries. As for the salt, it is one of the oldest purifying substances known. It saved your life. I tried to absorb all of this. And the current Mr. Flint, Harold. Does he know all of this? Harold Flint is the 5th generation. He was born into the responsibility of keeping watch. The mortuary cannot be closed or destroyed. That would break the seals. So the Flint family continues the work, keeping the gateway shut, handling the Winters when they appear. As I prepared to leave, Eliza gripped my arm. Be careful, Derek. Once they notice you, they don't forget. And the most recent Mary Winters, she is particularly powerful. I returned to the mortuary with my thoughts spinning. All of it sounded like a cheap horror film, except I had seen Mary Winters with my own eyes. I had heard her inhuman voice. Sebastian was waiting for me at the gate, his expression grave. I heard you visited Eliza, he said. She told you about the history of this place. I nodded. It's hard to believe. But you've seen Mary, so you know it's true. He lowered his voice. We have a problem. One of Mary Winters' personal effects has gone missing. What? A silver necklace with a 6-pointed star pendant. It was in her personal belongings bag. But when Mr. Flint checked this morning, it was gone. Sebastian looked at me gravely. We need to find it. It's part of the spirit-binding object. Without it, Mary's spirit may not have been fully dispatched. Hasn't she been transferred already? Normally, yes, Sebastian said. But without the necklace, we can't be certain. That night, I searched the cold room, the preparation room, and other areas for the silver necklace. Nothing. There was also no trace of Mary Winters herself. The measures Mr. Flint had taken seemed to have worked, even without the necklace. I began going through old files on previous Winters cases, stored in a locked cabinet in Flint's office. The key was rather poorly hidden under a plant pot. Over the decades, 27 Mary Winters cases had been recorded. Each shared common features. Young women, blue lips, always found at strange times of year, particularly near solstices and equinoxes, when the boundary between worlds was said to be thinnest. One file caught my attention. From 1972, the 18th Mary Winters, a woman whose real name was Elizabeth Chen, age 24. Unlike the others, Her file had a handwritten note linked to Winters 51897, same bloodline. I kept searching and found similar notes on several other files, including the most recent one, Bloodline of Winters. A suspicion began forming in my mind. I dug further and found information about the original Mary Winters, the woman from 1897. An old record noted that she had a daughter, born before her death, who had been placed in a local orphanage. I sat back, trying to connect the dots. It seemed the subsequent Mary Winters were not random victims. Many, perhaps all of them, were descendants of the original Mary Winters. The clock struck midnight. As if on cue, the telephone rang. I remembered Rule 8 and answered before the third ring. Flint and Sons. Derek speaking. You are looking for the necklace. A young woman's voice. Not the eerie voice of the Mary Winters I had encountered, but a normal, almost friendly one. Who is this? I asked on guard. Mary. Mary Winters. The real one. The first. The voice was gentle and sad. We are not your enemies, Derek. We are victims too. Victims of what? Of Ezekiel Flint. Of what he did. Of the curse he placed upon my bloodline. Her voice trembled. The necklace. It doesn't keep us out. It keeps us in. It's a cage, not protection. I don't understand, I said. You will. Tomorrow morning, go to the city library, the archive room. Find the records about the Flint family and the case of 1896. You'll find the truth. The voice became more urgent. And Derek, be careful with Harold Flint. He is not a guardian. He is a jailer. The line went dead. I stood there holding the receiver, a deep cold running through me. Who was telling the truth? Eliza and Flint, or the mysterious voice on the telephone? That night, I could not stop thinking about the Winters bloodline, the silver necklace, and the true secret of Flint and Sons. One thing was certain, I would go to the library in the morning. I needed to know the truth, however terrible it might be. After my night shift, I didn't go home to sleep as usual. Instead, I went directly to Edinburgh's Central Library, which housed an archive of the city's historical documents. I had to wait nearly 2 hours for the library to open, sitting in a nearby cafe, my mind turning over questions. The archive room was in the basement, a vast space lined with tall shelves packed with old records and documents. An elderly woman named Miss McPherson helped me search. The Flint family and the case of 1896, she repeated, raising an eyebrow. Quite specific. What are you researching? A local history project. I lied. She seemed unconvinced, but led me to a section containing digitized old newspapers. Perhaps start with the Scotsman and the Edinburgh Evening News. They covered the case thoroughly at the time. Which case exactly? I asked, feigning ignorance. Miss McPherson looked up at me. The Flint Winters case. One of Edinburgh's most notable cases from the late 19th century. I thought you were researching it. I only know a little, I admitted. Could you tell me more? She glanced around as if checking for eavesdroppers, then sat down beside me. Ezekiel Flint was a wealthy businessman and a member of Edinburgh's upper class. He married Margaret Crawford, the daughter of a noble family, but they had no children. In 1895, a young woman named Mary Winters appeared, claiming she was carrying Ezekiel's child. I nearly stopped breathing. Mary Winters had been a servant in the Flint household. She was dismissed when she became pregnant, but she refused to stay silent, unusual for the era. She threatened to reveal not only the child, but the strange experiments Ezekiel was conducting. Miss McPherson lowered her voice. People said he practiced some form of dark magic, and the case, in May 1896, Mary Winters was found dead in her room, or at least, everyone thought so. She was 7 months pregnant at the time. Ezekiel Flint personally arranged her embalming and burial under the pretense of Christian charity. 9 months after the incident, an infant appeared at the local orphanage, a girl given the name Rose Winters. No one knew where the child came from. The child survived? It appears so. Some people believed Mary wasn't truly dead when she was found, that Flint had kept her alive long enough to give birth. But that is speculation. She paused. As for Ezekiel Flint, 1 year after Mary's death, he was found dead in the basement of the mortuary under very strange circumstances. The death was ruled a suicide, but there were rumors. She stopped. Regardless, the Flint family continued to run the mortuary after that, passing it down from generation to generation. Miss McPherson directed me to a computer to view the digitized articles. I found many pieces about the mysterious death of Mary Winters in 1896, about the orphaned child, and about the frightful death of Ezekiel Flint in 1897. But what caught my attention most was a small article from 1921 mentioning the discovery of Mary Winters' diary. According to the article, the diary had been found hidden inside a wall of her former room when the building was demolished. The diary made reference to strange rituals Ezekiel performed in the mortuary basement and to the way he had marked the unborn child as a vessel. The article noted that the diary had been handed over to Harold Flint Sr., grandfather of the current Harold Flint. Digging further, I uncovered additional disturbing details. Across the generations, there had been many cases of young women dying under unusual circumstances, all under 30 years of age, many of them distant descendants of the original Mary Winters, and all of them brought to Flint and Sons. I also found information about the silver necklace. According to a book on Scottish folklore published in 1935, a silver necklace bearing a six-pointed star was a ritual object used to bind spirits and prevent them from crossing the boundary between worlds. The pieces were beginning to fit together. The original Mary Winters was not a supernatural entity, she was a victim. Ezekiel Flint had performed some kind of ritual on her unborn child, transforming her bloodline into a kind of bridge, a channel, to whatever lay on the other side. That explained why all the subsequent Mary Winters were connected to the first. They were all her distant descendants. And it appeared the Flint family had tracked the Winters lineage across generations, waiting for the signs. But one enormous question remained. Was the Flint family protecting the world from the entities beyond, or were they exploiting those entities' power for their own ends? I left the library with my mind in turmoil and decided to visit Eliza Lambert once more. I needed to hear her version of the story in light of everything I had just discovered. But when I arrived at Eliza's flat, I found the door slightly ajar. My heart hammered. I pushed it open. "Eliza?" I called. No answer. The flat looked as if a storm had torn through it. Books and objects thrown everywhere. Drawers pulled out and ransacked. Shelves knocked over. On the wall, written in something dark red, "Have you found it?" I stumbled back and bumped into a bookshelf. When I turned around, I noticed a small piece of paper that had fallen from a book. An old, carefully folded note. I picked it up and unfolded it. It was a black and white photograph. A man stood beside a young woman. The man I recognized as Ezekiel Flint from photographs I had seen at the library. The young woman I assumed was Mary Winters. What stunned me was this. Around her neck she wore a silver necklace with a six-pointed star pendant, identical to the one that had gone missing from the current Mary Winters' belongings. On the back of the photograph, handwritten, "For when you are ready to know the truth," L, and beneath that, an address somewhere in Edinburgh. I decided not to call the police. It was unclear where Eliza was, but my instinct told me this was not something the police could handle. Instead, I left and looked up the address on the photograph. It led to an ancient church in the south of the city, St. Margaret of Antioch, a venerable structure standing apart, surrounded by a small graveyard. The church looked as though it had been abandoned for decades, its stained glass windows shattered. The main door secured with chain and padlock. A small sign indicated it had been closed since 1963. I circled the building, searching for another way in. Around the back, I found a basement window slightly ajar. Curiosity overwhelming caution, I squeezed through and dropped into the darkness below. Switching on my phone's torch, I found myself in a small room filled with old wooden crates. Moving deeper into the church, I found a staircase leading up to the main nave. Inside, the church was desolate and cold. Pews thick with dust, statues crumbled. But what truly seized my attention was the altar area. Behind the altar, a section of stone flooring had been shifted, revealing a passage leading downward. Heart pounding, I slowly descended the ancient steps. At the bottom was a small circular room, likely the church's original crypt. But it had been altered, Carved deep into the stone floor was a circle covered in symbols I didn't recognize. At the center of the circle stood a stone plinth, and upon the plinth lay an old book wrapped in leather. I approached and recognized it as a diary. Mary Winter's diary, pages yellowed with age, written in a delicate hand. I began to read, and the true story slowly revealed itself. Mary had not merely been Ezekiel's servant, she had also been his student. Ezekiel had been studying not how to open a gateway, but how to close one. A gateway that was already open. An ancient passage that lay beneath the land on which the church and later the mortuary had been built. According to Mary's diary, Ezekiel had discovered that the gateway could only be sealed through the sacrifice of a chosen bloodline, a specific lineage with the natural ability to connect with the world beyond. He had determined that Mary, with her gift for seeing and hearing things others could not, belonged to that bloodline. But rather than sacrificing Mary, Ezekiel had devised a different solution. He had marked her unborn child, transforming the Winters bloodline into hereditary guardians of the gateway across the generations. Every few decades, a descendant of Mary would develop a powerful connection, and that person would have to be brought to the mortuary to perform a ritual, using the silver necklace to reseal the gateway. The terrifying truth was this: the Flint family were not heroes protecting humanity from entities beyond. They were exploiters, harvesting the Winters bloodline for their own purposes. According to the diary, Ezekiel had discovered that each time the gateway was resealed, the person conducting the ritual was granted extended power and unnaturally prolonged life. I suddenly understood the clues that had been before me all along. Harold Flint, whose age was impossible to pin down, the fact that he always handled the Winters cases personally, the mysterious deaths of the Winters descendants across the generations. When I reached the final pages of the diary, I heard footsteps on the staircase. I quickly hid the diary inside my jacket and pressed myself behind a large stone column. From my hiding place, I watched Harold Flint enter the room, followed by Sebastian. Between them, held tightly and clearly terrified, was Eliza Lambert. "I know you gave him the photograph," Flint said, his voice cold with anger. "What do you think you're doing, Eliza, after all your years with us?" "Doing the right thing," Eliza replied, her voice weak but resolute. "The Winters bloodline has been exploited long enough. I have been silent too long. And you think that Sullivan boy can do anything?" Flint sneered. "He's nothing but a failed medical student." "He's intelligent," Eliza said. "And he's met Mary. She chose him." Sebastian glanced around nervously. "We should hurry, sir. The ritual must be completed before midnight." "There's time," Flint said. "And we've found the necklace." He held it up. The silver necklace with the six-pointed star, glittering in the torchlight. "You don't understand," Eliza said. "This Mary Winters is different. She's stronger, and she's tired of being used." "Stronger or not, she still obeys the laws," Flint said. "And with the necklace, I can control her. I can control all of them." As they began to prepare the ritual, I slipped from my hiding place and moved toward the staircase. I needed to get out. I needed to tell someone. But who would believe a story like this? Then, as I neared the staircase, a rotting wooden board gave way under my foot with a loud creak that echoed through the silent room. Flint and Sebastian spun around. "Who's there?" Sebastian shouted. Abandoning all caution, I bolted up the stairs. I heard them giving chase behind me. I needed to get out of the church. I needed to stop the ritual. I needed to save Eliza. And above all, I needed to learn more about the real Mary Winters. Not the terrifying entity from the cold room, but the woman who had contacted me by telephone. The woman who had tried to tell me the truth. As I sprinted through the abandoned church with Sebastian's voice echoing behind me, I knew that my part-time job at the mortuary had become something far larger and far more dangerous than anything I had ever signed up for. I ran through the streets of Edinburgh in the fading light, heart pounding, Mary's diary heavy in my jacket pocket. I didn't dare return to my flat. If Flint and Sebastian knew I had been in the church, that would be the first place they'd look. Instead, I found a small cafe and sat in the farthest corner, ordering a black coffee and trying to organize my thoughts. I took out the diary and continued reading from where I had stopped. The final pages revealed that Mary Winters had been aware of Ezekiel's plan and had taken precautions of her own. She had created a counterpart to the necklace, an object capable of permanently ending the curse upon her bloodline and closing the gateway without any further sacrifice. According to the diary, this object was a silver ring bearing a green stone, hidden in the first and last place, a riddle I couldn't yet decode. I checked my phone. 8:36 p.m. If what had been said was true, the ritual had to be completed before midnight. I had fewer than 4 hours to find the ring and stop Flint. But I couldn't do this alone. I needed help. Hannah. She knew the mortuary, she knew the rules, and she seemed genuinely not loyal to Flint the way Sebastian was. I called her. She picked up immediately. Derek, what's going on? Hannah, I need to meet you. Right now. This is a matter of life and death. Oh God. Are you all right? Where are you? I gave her directions to the cafe. About half an hour later, Hannah arrived, face drawn with worry, slightly breathless. What's happened? She asked, sitting down across from me. I told her everything I had discovered about the original Mary Winters, about Ezekiel Flint, about the ritual, and about how the Flint family had exploited the Winters bloodline for generations. I showed her the diary and the photograph I had found at Eliza's flat. My God, Hannah whispered when I finished. I always knew there was something wrong about him, about the Winters. But this, I need to find the ring, I said, and I need to save Eliza. Flint will kill her after the ritual, I'm certain of it. Hannah looked out the window thinking. The first and last place, she said slowly. I think I know where that is. Really? The original mortuary. The building where Ezekiel Flint first opened his business. It isn't the current building. The original was destroyed in a fire in 1932, and they rebuilt on the same site. But the original basement still exists, sealed off and forgotten, beneath the current one. How do we get in? There's an old access point from the garage, Hannah explained. I stumbled across it a few years ago while looking for storage supplies. Mr. Flint doesn't know I ever went down there. We quickly formed a plan. Hannah would return to the mortuary ahead of me, using the excuse of having forgotten something, and let me in through the back. Then we would search for the ring in the old basement. Flint and Sebastian would be at the church all night preparing the ritual, wouldn't they? As long as they're there and not here, Hannah said, but we need to be careful. When we left the cafe, night had fully fallen. Heavy black clouds obscured the moon, and a cold wind swept through Edinburgh's cobblestone streets. We took separate routes to avoid being noticed. I hid in the shadows outside the mortuary's back door, the drizzle turning to rain that soaked through my jacket in seconds. Cold drops slid down my face like ghostly fingers. Then the back door opened quietly and Hannah beckoned me in. No one's here, she whispered, but we have to move quickly. The mortuary without lights at night was an entirely different place. Shadows seemed to shift and breathe, and the sounds of pipes and cooling systems amplified the dread. Hannah led me down to the current basement, a large space filled with embalming supplies, unused coffins, and funeral equipment. In the far corner, behind a coffin rack, was a small wooden door, almost completely hidden from view. Here, Hannah said, pushing the rack aside. Careful. The stairs are steep and unstable. She opened the door to reveal a narrow stone staircase descending into darkness. We turned on our phone torches and went down slowly, every footstep making the stairs groan beneath us. The old basement was cold and damp, with a low ceiling and many stone support columns. The rough stone walls were covered in moss and fungus, and the smell of damp earth was thick in the air. This is older than the original mortuary, Hannah whispered. I think this was a cellar of a 12th century monastery. We began to search, sweeping our torches into every corner and crevice. Time passed, and desperation began creeping in. We would never find a small ring in a space this large. And then something occurred to me. The first and last place, I murmured. Hannah, this isn't just a location. It's a person. What do you mean? Mary Winters, the first person to carry the name Winters, and the last true Winters of her direct line. All the others grew up with different names adopted by different families. So where would the ring be? I thought about what I had read. Ezekiel was responsible for her embalming and burial. But if he didn't truly bury her, if she's here? We looked around the room with renewed purpose. And I noticed a section of the floor that looked different from the rest. Stones arranged in a circular pattern. We went over and began testing each stone. Finally, one shifted beneath my hand. Together, Hannah and I lifted the stone, revealing a small hollow beneath. Lying on a scrap of rotted cloth was a small antique box. My heart was in my throat. I opened it. Inside was a silver ring with a green stone, exactly as described in the diary. Beside it was a scrap of paper bearing a brief message. For the one who finally breaks the circle, place the ring into the necklace and speak my name 3 times. We found it, I whispered, lifting the ring. It was ice cold in my palm, but it gradually warmed, as if it had a life of its own. What now? Hannah asked. We have to go to the church. We have to stop the ritual. As we turned back toward the stairs, I heard sounds from the current basement above. Footsteps. Someone was up there. Someone's there, I whispered. Hannah switched off her torch and we stood in near total darkness, barely daring to breathe. The footsteps stopped at the top of the staircase. A beam of torchlight swept down. I know you're both down there. Sebastian's voice came from above. Come up, and maybe I'll consider letting you live. My heart sank. We were trapped. Is there another way out? I whispered to Hannah. She shook her head. This is a dead end. Sebastian began descending, his torch swinging. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Sullivan. Mr. Flint needs that ring. You knew about the ring? I asked, startled. Sebastian laughed quietly. Of course I knew. I've worked for the Flint family since 1973. That's impossible, Hannah whispered. He'd have to be over 70. That is the reward for serving the rituals, Sebastian said, reaching the last step and shining his torch directly into our faces. Longevity! Not as much as Mr. Flint enjoys, but enough to keep me effective. He kills innocent women, I said, the Winter's descendants. For a greater good, Sebastian said, his voice cold. Or so we were told. But enough. Give me the ring, Sullivan. And if I don't? Sebastian drew a large hunting knife from inside his jacket, the blade glinting in the torchlight. I don't need both of you alive to take the ring. I glanced at Hannah, trying to convey something with my eyes. She gave a slight nod. She understood. All right, I said, slowly reaching toward the ring. You win. Here. I pretended to stumble as I stepped toward Sebastian, deliberately dropping the ring. When he bent to pick it up, Hannah shoved a rotting wooden shelf hard into him. Sebastian staggered backward, and I seized the moment, snatching up the ring and sprinting for the staircase with Hannah right behind me. We pounded up the steps, hearing Sebastian's furious swearing and the thud of his heavy footsteps in pursuit. In the current basement, we slammed the small wooden door shut and shoved the coffin rack back in front of it. That won't hold him long, Hannah gasped. We have to go now. We ran through the basement, up the stairs, and out the back door. Outside, the drizzle had become a downpour, soaking us through within seconds. The rain streaked cold down our faces as we ran through the dark streets toward the church. When we reached St. Margaret's, we found the front door still chained, but the basement window I had used before was still open. We climbed through and went straight to the underground room beneath the altar. As we drew close, we heard chanting, a slow, mournful melody in an ancient language I couldn't identify. Peering through the gap in the door of the underground chamber, I saw a sight that froze my blood. Flint stood in the center of the carved circle, dressed in a long black robe. Eliza knelt before him, hands bound behind her back, and laid out on the stone plinth was a body, Mary Winters, with her blue lips and chalk-white skin, brought from the mortuary. Flint was holding the silver necklace, speaking strange words as he moved around the circle. The ritual had begun. We have to stop him, Hannah whispered. You get Eliza free, I said. I'll deal with Flint. We pushed the door open and burst inside. Flint spun around, his face contorted with fury. Sullivan! You never know when to stop, do you? End the ritual, I commanded, moving toward him. I know the truth. About Mary. About what you've done to her bloodline. You know nothing, Flint sneered. You think this is about power and longevity? This is about keeping the gateway closed. If it opens, we all die. Hannah had moved toward Eliza and was working at her bonds. Flint noticed and shouted, "Don't ruin this!" He raised a hand, and as if moved by an invisible force, Hannah was flung against the wall and crumpled to the ground, motionless. "Hannah!" I cried. "Now it's just you and me," Flint said. His voice had changed, deeper, older, as if many voices spoke at once. "Give me the ring, and perhaps I'll let you live. You no longer decide who lives and who dies," I said, gripping the ring tight. From the corner of my eye, I saw Mary Winter's body on the stone plinth begin to tremble. At first, small movements, then stronger convulsions. "It's too late," Flint said with a vicious smile. "She's waking, and this time, no one can control her." Mary Winter's eyes snapped open, but not the black voids I had seen in the cold room. These were human eyes, wide with fear and confusion. "Help me," she whispered. In that instant, I knew something had shifted. This was not the terrifying entity from the cold room. This was the real Mary Winters, the one who had called me on the telephone, the one who had tried to tell me the truth. Without thinking, I lunged toward the stone plinth, past Flint. He tried to block me, but I was faster. I reached Mary and pressed the ring into her hand. "No!" Flint screamed. Mary closed her hand around the ring. A pale blue light began to emanate from it. At the same moment, footsteps thundered down the staircase. Sebastian had arrived. "Mr. Flint!" Sebastian shouted, entering the chamber. I tried to stop them. He froze, staring at the scene before him with an expression of horror. Flint was on his knees, both hands clutching his chest as if in terrible pain. Mary had sat upright on the stone plinth, the ring glowing brighter and brighter in her hand. "Put the ring into the necklace," I told Mary, recalling the message in the box. "Speak your name 3 times. She looked at me, her eyes clear and full of gratitude. She extended her hand, and as if drawn by an invisible force, the silver necklace flew from Flint's grip into her palm. "No!" Flint screamed, lunging toward her. Mary placed the ring into the center of the 6-pointed star on the necklace. Blue light spread across the entire chain, consuming it. "Mary Winters!" she said, her voice clear and strong. "Mary Winters! Mary Winters!" The chamber shook. A blinding column of light erupted from the carved circle on the floor. I shielded my face with my arm and squeezed my eyes shut. When I opened them, Mary Winters stood at the center of the circle, not her physical body, a form of light nearly translucent. Beside her were many other such forms, women with different faces, but the same eyes, the same bearing. "The Mary Winters," I whispered. Flint was on the floor, collapsed, and visibly aging before my eyes. His skin was wrinkling rapidly, his hair turning white, his eyes clouding over. The stolen years were reclaiming what was owed. "You don't understand," he rasped, his voice growing feebler. "It will break free, without the sealing." "There is nothing on the other side, Harold," the first Mary Winters said, her voice resonating as from a great distance. "Only us, the ones trapped by your family's greed." Ezekiel lied. He invented a story to justify exploiting my bloodline, so that he and his descendants could live forever. She moved toward Flint, but her tone had softened. "But it ends now. The circle is broken." As she spoke, the other forms of light began to fade, one by one, as if each had finally been set free. Sebastian, standing in the doorway, watched it all in stunned silence, and then, like Flint, time caught up with him. His hair went silver, his skin creased and sagged, his back curved under unseen weight. "What is happening to me?" he whispered. "Time," Mary said. "Ezekiel's gift is being revoked." Flint collapsed onto the floor, breathing in shallow gasps. His body had become a frail, hollow shell. "All those years," he murmured. "All of them." "They are over," Mary said. She turned to look at me. Her luminous face held a quiet, sorrowful smile. "Thank you, Derek Sullivan. You did what no one dared to do for more than a century." "I only wanted to know the truth," I said, "and you found it." She looked toward Hannah, who was stirring against the wall, and toward Eliza, now free of her bonds. "Take care of them," Mary said to me. "Take care of this place. There are still secrets here that must be kept." "What about you?" I asked. Mary smiled. "I have been here far too long. It is time to rest." The luminous form of her began to fade, and in the final moment, what I saw was not a woman, but a young girl with a joyful smile and bright shining eyes. Mary Winters as she had truly been, before all of this began. Then she was gone. The blue light vanished with her. The necklace and the ring fell to the floor with a soft, clear chime, drained of all power. I looked at Flint and Sebastian, two frail old men lying on the stone, barely breathing. The stolen years had reclaimed every one of their debts. They would not last more than a few minutes. Hannah came to my side and held me tightly. "You did it," she whispered. "We did it," I corrected. "All of us." Eliza stumbled over to us, her face exhausted but relieved. "Mary can rest now," she said softly. "All of them can." When we left the underground chamber, leaving the two ancient, wasted figures behind, I carried the necklace and ring with me, not for their power, but to ensure that no one could ever repeat what the Flint family had done. Outside the church, the rain had stopped. The night sky opened above us, filled with stars. A new chapter had begun, for Mary Winters, for the mortuary, and for me. My part-time job at the private mortuary had come to an end. But I had a feeling that my connection to this strange, hidden world had only just begun.